Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about navigating the twists and turns of life and embracing the imperfections of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches Catherine and Kirsty, and our mission is to support you in finding your own path, your own way, with greater clarity and self trust, no matter how messy or uncertain things may seem.
We address the roadblocks that come up time and time again for our coaching clients, from acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
As well as asking lots of questions, a coach's favourite thing to do, we'll be sharing thoughts and insights and offering plenty of tips, tools, and techniques for you to try.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves. Hello and welcome to this bite-sized tips, tools and techniques episode all about the spheres of control, which sounds like it should have a very impressive sound effect to go with it, don't you think?
Yes.
The
If we
spheres
were
of control.
if we had more technology skills between us, perhaps we would try and put like a sound effect in there, but it's not likely, is it? So we'll just
Nah.
ask you to imagine it instead. Yes. But we thought we would follow on from last week's episode when we were talking about control and just how tricky it is, which I think we realized it was even more tricky, didn't we, as we were discussing it in that episode. You know,
Hmm.
we were talking about why we can be drawn to wanting it, what might cause it. There's some really common examples that I think everyone can relate to, but also why it was problematic and
Yeah.
even more so than we thought.
Yes.
So
We,
let's
we made we
let's
made it more problematic, I think.
probably yes, we lost control of the episode, like we said. But anyway, back on track, we think we have got something that is useful for this week's coaching bite size, which is really designed to answer the question: what really is within your control and what isn't? And I think it can be such a helpful reference point for people. So it is called, I've heard it called the spheres of control and also the spheres of influence. Have you heard it called
Yes.
anything else, Kirsty?
Not anything else, but I've heard it the word influence used instead of control, yes.
I think I slightly prefer control for reasons that will become clear because influence features, but I also like the fact that it's quite clearly about what's within my control and
Mm.
what absolutely is not. It's outside of my control, and then the sort of middle part is the influence. But let's go through it, what it is and how it works. So if you can imagine three circles, a large one with a medium one fully inside it, and then a smaller one sat right in the middle. So you've got sort of three circles within each other. These are spheres of control or influence. So it can be helpful to appreciate what might actually sit within each of these, and we'll explain exactly what we mean by that. So the outermost circle, which is actually the largest, of course, is the sphere of no control, which I
Ooh.
quite like that. Sometimes labeled as concern, but again, I think I prefer the more direct no control.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if
Yeah,
concern
I,
is
I
doing it for me there.
no, I agree. I saw it when I was researching this and I thought, things of concern? I don't know, because I can be concerned about
No.
perhaps all sorts of things, which I don't think but
There are
that's
many,
probably a
many
whole other
irrelevant
episode.
things that I know I'm not controlling, yes.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's the
No, I think
point. Yeah.
I like this direct no control because
Yes.
after all, a lot of things can be concerning, but this is really about what we can and can't control. So what sits in this circle? And it's actually quite a lot. And it's things like other people's choices and opinions, world events, the past, because we can't change that, the weather, the
Mm.
economy, the political landscape. There's probably a
It's all
huge
a bit
amount more.
depressing, really, isn't it?
Yes, sorry, it wasn't it wasn't supposed to be a list of depressing things, especially with the weather at the moment. We're recording this in the UK at the moment where I think it's been one of the wettest starts of the year ever, hasn't it? It's rained every single day in the UK since the
Yeah,
start
I,
of the year.
I actually think I've got trench foot. But,
Yes.
but yes, and the political landscape and all that's going on. I mean, good grief, yes. But we cannot control these things when it boils down to it. Yet we
Yeah,
can spend a lot of
exactly.
time complaining about them and agonizing over them and ruminating on all the things from the past and everything that's going on around us. But it doesn't help.
No, no, it's not to say that we don't care about these things. I mean, it's hard not to, isn't it? When you watch the news or look at a news app or anything like that, you see these things and you think, you know, all sorts of
Yeah.
things go through your head, like how did we get to this? How's this the state of the world today? And it's not about necessarily ignoring them either. And it's very hard because sometimes I feel like I open my news app and I just want to close it again straight away. But the thing is, no matter how much I care or how much I want to ignore, the point we're making here is that we can't control
Yeah.
them. But so, for example, you can vote, but it doesn't mean you control who's in power. You can save money, but you can't control interest rates. So you can be doing
Yeah.
something or expressing an interest or caring, but you can't control facets around it. And you may be kind to someone, but you can't control their response or their gratitude. Perhaps, is how often do you see that example? You hold the door open for someone, or you're in a car and you let someone have the right of way and they just completely blank you. Nothing
Yes.
you can do about that.
In which case, the traditional passive aggressive British approach is to go, that's quite all right, as loudly as possible if you've held the door open for someone, isn't it? But then if they look round, you pretend you haven't said it and you look away and yeah.
There's so many examples, aren't there, in our lives when we think about it. But yeah, these are things that we can't
Oh,
control, even though we've touched on some of the things actually that we can do, which are things like the voting, the saving money, being kind, all those things. But we'll come on to those a bit more in detail because it's further inside the spheres of control. So let's move on and talk about the middle circle. This is one that is called the sphere of influence. So we don't have control here, but we can have some influence. So this will be
hmm.
things like relationships, conversations, perhaps health habits, work dynamics. What you notice about these things is these are things where you've got some kind of input, but the rest of it perhaps is a bit unknown or depends on someone else. So, for example, a
Right.
conversation that you think is going to go a certain way, it may not go the way you think it's going to because of the way the other person responds, which you don't have control over. But of course, you could influence it by, say you're a manager having a difficult conversation. If you go in shouting and intimidating towards the person on the receiving end, it's likely to be a very different conversation than
Yes,
if you try and explain your case, calmly and empathetically.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean that there's definitely that potential for influence, even if we can't be sure of how it will turn out. So there's where
Yeah.
the way we behave, the things we do, the choices we make are definitely going to have some kind, well, almost definitely going to have some kind of impact on the situation. And we'd
Yes.
like to think we know what it is, but we can't guarantee it.
Yeah, exactly that. It's influence doesn't guarantee a certain result. It might be more likely to go the way we think or hope that it's going to, but your actions are definitely parts of the equation. So, for example, you make an effort to get in touch with an old friend, hoping they will respond. And there's no guarantee that they may be inclined to. It's going to be depending on what you said and the relationship that you have and all those other things. But if you didn't reach out at all, what were the chances of them randomly messaging you? Probably a lot lower.
Mm,
So that's an
yes.
example of how there's influence there at play.
Yes, if you want to rekindle that relationship and you don't do anything, it's a
Yeah.
lot less likely to happen than if you do something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You could cut down on chocolate consumption, for example, hoping for a more
I'm sorry.
favorable.
Could you say that
Yes,
again?
I
I
know.
didn't quite understand it.
I'm sorry. Yes, I know. But if you had good reason to, for example, you want to have a more favorable blood sugar reading at your next GP appointment, yes, hopefully it's far more likely that you will do so. But of course, it will be dependent on other factors, some of which you won't have been able to control, even if you did, very sadly, cut down on the chocolate and still didn't get that result that you were looking for.
Yes, I mean, quite shockingly, perhaps, I have achieved this in the past. But yeah, for some people, so two people could make the same changes and not have the same outcome. So
Yeah.
you can't always guarantee. I keep using that word guarantee. This is quite, if I've understood it correctly, that is quite a key part of this sphere of influence. There are no guarantees.
Yeah. You're just trying to perhaps increase the likelihood. So, another
Mm.
example, you might ask your manager for a conversation over work prospects or a pay rise, promotion, whatever it might be. So, of course, there's no guarantee that one of those things is going to be at the end of that conversation. But at least you could say you're more likely to be clued up as to what the likelihood is, and maybe even what might be required of you to get it. So, it could be that
Yeah.
there is no promotion opportunity at the moment, but there might be if XYZ. And now at least you know what XYZ is. So you're actually a step closer. You haven't guaranteed yourself that outcome, but you've perhaps set up more of a likelihood of it becoming that way.
Yeah. So we've got that outer circle where we've actually got no control.
Yeah.
World events, the economy, the weather. We've got the middle circle where we've got there's the sphere of influence where we can what we do can change the outcome, but not guaranteed. So what's in the inner circle?
Yes. So the inner circle, it is control. And it is the
Oh,
smallest circle, definitely for a reason, because the truth is the only thing that sits here is you. And it's things like your choices, your behavior, your boundaries, your responses. Sometimes I'd argue my involuntary screaming at a spider is not a within my control, but on the whole, I think people understand what we mean. This is really the only thing that we can have control over. So it is therefore it's a lot
yeah.
smaller than most people think. When people think about what they can control, I think they've put a, I think they think that inner circle is bigger and the other two are a lot smaller, but that's just not the way it is.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we trying to think of the right phrase, almost controls like habit stacking. We kind of assume that we've got more control because we're sort of chunking it up in some way. But or we're seeing the last bit of the puzzle and not thinking about everything else that goes into it. So I guess a bit like applying for a job because you know that you've got control over making that choice to apply, about how you complete the application, you know, what you put in it and how you write it. You feel you've got more control. Whereas when you start looking about everything else that's going on around the decision being made about who to offer that job to, there is way more going on that is not in your control.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that made a lot of sense.
No, I think it does. I think that the sad because of course we don't operate in isolation. That's the very sad thing, isn't it? We
Yeah.
think
Yes.
we're
I think
each
you just summed it up.
walking
Yeah.
around. We're each walking around in theory in control of just ourselves, but we have all the relationships and connections and existing alongside other people. That's what overall makes this very complicated.
We are seeing the tip of the iceberg when we think about what
Yes.
we can control and not realizing how much more is going on there. That means that even the bit we can control is not guaranteed. Guaranteed, here we go again, that word. Um, to deliver what we want.
But I am just, it made it sound like that it was very difficult to have any control or for it to be meaningful, I suppose. We're saying, yes, you put your best application forward, but there's so much beyond your control, you still might not get the job. Unfortunately, that is true.
Yeah.
But let's not perhaps downplay the importance of those things that we did just mention: choices, behavior, boundaries, responses. So let's just give a couple of examples. So just imagine this happens: your partner snaps at you. That wasn't within your control, that was someone else's
Well, it
behavior, bad
might
day, whatever.
might depend on what you've just done to them.
It might this is true, but let's just imagine that it perhaps came out of the blue. You can decide whether you're going to snap back, whether to leave the room, whether to talk to them about it later, for example. Those are your actions and your
Yeah.
control. I mean, you might feel very indignant about whatever you choose to do and think, what did I do to deserve this? And all those other things. But you can still demonstrate choice over what you say and do in response. Same as, say, oh, I've got another traffic example here. Someone cuts you up. You can decide to rant and rave about it, beep your horn, or perhaps, find your happy place and just pretend it never happened.
Catherine, do you suffer from road rage? I feel I have to ask this question. Is it something we
Uh,
need to talk about?
no, no. I put the find your happy place for the it's like breathe. No, I have to be honest. I think we've spoken about this before a long, long time ago. I find driving
Yeah.
quite stressful
Mm.
anyway, and that's even the bits that's within my control. But actually, the thing that I find a bit unnerving is actually it's other drivers, their
Yeah,
behaviour, the weather, the potholes, all those other things. Which is a really good example. Not within my control.
it
All I've
is. Yeah.
got is how I will drive the car and try not to, curse other drivers and that kind of thing. I got another example. Someone tells you a joke and you find it offensive. Perhaps it's sexist or something like that. You can decide whether you're going to laugh along, whether you're going to ignore it, or whether you're going to perhaps say something and confront them. And this relates very much. We spoke about this in a previous
Mm.
episode. You could say something like, "Explain it to me," to really put them on the spot and make them feel uncomfortable about having to explain why their sexist joke is funny. And I love that. I am so
Yes.
keeping that up my sleeve, ready for when I need it. I haven't needed
You're
it yet, but I'm ready.
you're desperate for someone to tell you a sexist joke, aren't you?
Or just something that's clearly not funny, just so I can,
Yeah.
if it's in bad taste, I feel like I'm going to have to call it out now. I think that's part of my getting older and just not caring quite so much about other people's not in a selfish way. Like I don't care about other people's feelings, but it's like I'm not going to just sort of ignore something that I don't think
Yeah.
should be ignored. So let's go back to the spheres of control. So
Oh, yes.
what is it, see, I kind of get my words out now. What is it about these spheres that can help? Okay, so most of us try to shoehorn an awful lot into that middle, so I say middle, it's actually the inner circle, and not everything or everyone belongs there.
Mm.
That's just the truth.
Yeah.
And I think our energy drains and our frustration rises when something from the outer or middle circle is treated as though it belongs in the inner one. Think that's what is
Yes.
a source of frustration for people. And we can actually find some peace and space from accepting things belong in different spaces rather than the one that's all on top of us, let's be honest, because they're saying that inner circle is all about you. Imagine if you bundle everything else in there. That's an awful lot for one person to bear, isn't it?
It is. That's a huge responsibility. I'm not sure I'm in favor of responsibility. I'm not grown up enough for that.
No.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. So let's shove more things out
Yes,
rather than
let's.
shoehorn them in. Yeah.
Everything into the outer circle, please.
So maybe next time something is being particularly vexatious to you, you could consider this question: which circle does this really belong in? And are there parts of this issue I can have in my innermost circle? And if so, what next? So I think that
Mm.
helps to break things down because I think we've spoken about so many examples where there might be a little piece that can go into the middle in the inner circle next to you, but there will be other elements that belong in the sphere outside of that, and then the one outside of that as well. If you
Yes,
break it
it's.
down that way, it takes away all that overwhelming
Hmm.
responsibility and feelings of frustration and what's making it vexatious for you. And you can sort of think about, okay, what next for the bit that's me in the middle?
Yes, you've got to analyze that sphere, that iceberg of control, which is not a metaphor that really works, is it?
No, I think you're gonna have to draw this, Kirsty. Well, if we manage to get something, we'll include it because we'll have a sphere of control and an iceberg of control.
Yes, that tip of the iceberg is the very often the only bit we can control, and recognizing that and knowing which parts the rest of the iceberg, which parts of the sphere of control the rest of the iceberg belongs to, is going to make a difference.
Yeah,
And I think a final thing to consider when you're thinking about what you can control or not control is what if I trust myself to somehow deal with this?
yeah,
Because you can. You've dealt with everything else. You'll deal with this, even if it's not quite what you wanted or hoped for or expected. You'll find a way of dealing with it.
yeah. So there we go. That is spheres of control. We have a blog which we can reference in the show notes. It'll just show you a diagram, so you can definitely get that visual reference of what we meant.
Yeah.
And if Kirsty produces an iceberg, we'll put that in there too. But otherwise, I think the picture is probably quite clear. There's an awful lot of iceberg images, aren't there, to show this idea of what we see is
Yeah.
so much less than what we realize is really going on. And I think it applies to so many different things in life. But we forget, don't we? We forget about all that stuff under the surface because it's out of sight, possibly out of mind.
Indeed.
So there we go. That's everything we've got to say on the subject of control for now. And we will see you all soon for another episode. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect. We'd love to hear your thoughts on any of our episodes, especially if you've had a light bulb moment in answering one of the questions, have benefited from one of the tips, or have a suggestion for an episode topic.
And if these conversations have made you curious about how coaching could help you, please don't hesitate to get in touch with one or both of us to find out more about what we offer. Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.